It was quite rough and a way of life of doing without lots of needs. I never forget, it was quite a way of suffering and, as I said, doing without a lot of need, the things that you need. I never forget, I grew up on the farm out. My daddy, he was a farmer, and so my first job after leaving him on the farm was on the railroad. I left home and got a job on the railroad and worked. That was what I was doing. Well, what I can remember about that was that I didn't think it was going to get better there, and I remember trying to choose and find some other place to go and live. And I never forget, I could hear of a lot of railroad construction in Mississippi, and I was planning to go there. And before I got ready and got myself planned to leave, I heard of work in California. There was two fellows I grew up with that had left and come here. One was named Robert Taylor. He was my children's mother's uncle. And the other one was Henry Bayless. He was their mother's sister's husband. They just wrote back home, and the people would talk what they was doing, how much money they was making. So then I made up my mind to come here. Yeah, yes, it did. So, no, it wasn't. That's something I never forget. And growing up, I was the youngest of 4 sons, and I used to be obedient to him. And he was used to. And then after I grew up and got married, I still looked to him to advise me, go to him. And so I went there and told him that I planned to leave and come to California. And I had my time set, maybe a couple of 3 weeks. So, and I had to borrow my fare. So I didn't borrow it from him. I had been getting a little money from him, but this was going to be $50 is what I needed. And there was a man that run the gin uptown there that I usually would go and get $5 or $6 from him. So I went to him. His name was Will Munn. He's a tall, kind of senior fellow. I never forget the day I went there and told him that I wanted to borrow $50. I heard that they had jobs in California, and he let me have that money. I just think of it now and say it was just the Lord's blessings. He pulled it out of his pocket and counted it out to me. And then I caught a bus. Yeah, well, now the bus was crowded, mixed with all races, and there was women and men. Yes, one thing that I was real concerned and interested about was what they was making per hour and day. And as I was just saying when I borrowed this money, my fare from this gin man, he said something that I didn't never understand until after I got here, and he told me, says, when he let me have the money, he says, going to California. So he run his hand in his pocket and pulled it out and give it to me. He said, now don't go out there and get your head knocked off. So I didn't know exactly what he meant, but thinking about it later, he had heard about the racial difference there and back there. And on my way here on the bus, it was crowded, and I never will forget, there was a white lady sitting right next to me, and just above me was some young black fellas, and one of them, when we got over the line into California, well, the first bus stop, and the bus drivers called the name of the place, California. And one of these guys sitting there, well, we're in California now. Y'all can forget about being pushed around with these folks now, 'cause they don't do it out here. He did a lot of talk. Yeah, that just saying yes or no, sir. I never will forget that. I said, well, sure enough, when I got here, well, I found out what he meant. He had been here before. It was more friendly, and so I didn't see there wasn't too much fighting and going on, but of racial. But there was one fight I never forget about. It was my brother that was there when this happened. It was on the ship, and there was stages, about 4 different stages going up and working on the ship. And this white, I don't know whether he was a shipyard, I think, dropped his heavy wrench, and it fell down the side of a black guy down on the next stage. And this guy, he was just overbearing, cussed and raised, saying, that wrench had hit me, I'd climb up there and invade you. Cussed him, and if you don't like it, come on down, said the white guy. Well, I ain't had a fight in a long time, but I'm coming down. Come down there, and they hooked up fists and that. So after one of the black guys said, well, let's stop them. They run in and grabbed them, pulled them apart, and stopped them. So after everything was quieting down, I heard some of them ask this guy, the man said, that was some fist and skull. Who won it? He said, I don't know who won it. All I know, I don't want to fight with so-and-so no more. Oh, it was just wonderful and peaceful. There wasn't no trouble at all. It was, I was just so surprised and glad of the way, well, I was, I wasn't expecting no trouble, but I wasn't expecting to find it as peaceful as it was. I remember what a crowd it was. I was in Berkeley, and I had been directed how to catch the streetcar to go to the shipyard. So I rode the streetcar to a lot of people. I mean, there was a lot of people. There'd be a long line getting on the streetcar, and then when we got to the shipyard, it was a long line being hired, but they was hiring people just like that in a long line. And all I knew was I wanted a job in the shipyard. And I remember when I finally got up to the little window where the lady was, a young white lady, and she asked me, what yard do you want to go to? So I didn't know what to tell her. I paused there, and she says, yard 3? I said, well, it'll be all right. So she wrote me up for Yard 3. That was the best one. And I went on to Yard 3, and there was a long line there. And so when I got up to where she wanted to know what I wanted to do, I couldn't tell her, and she says, well, if you'd be a boilermaker, you'd be a driller. I told her, all right. She wrote me up as a driller, and that was the first job I had when I went in there. It was drilling holes for the bolting, you know, and the driller and the chipper did about the same work. Drilling, you're running a air drill and drilling holes for bolts. And the chipping was, you know, had that chipping gun that cut steel. You did both of them. So after I worked, I don't remember how long I was working. And they promoted me for a lead man in charge of the crew. So I said, thanks about it. Working hard and being honest and being timely, you know. That's what did that. Well, they didn't act no ways contrary at all. They would carry on just fine. I didn't have no problem like that. I think I believe it was. Yeah, the two wasn't too much trouble in, like there no racial problems. I don't remember any. That was so different. I had never had like $100 cash in my hand, you know, that I'd earned. And so I remember so well that after I worked, I don't know how long I'd worked, a few months, and then made a trip back home. And me and my wife planned then when I come back, go to work and then send for them. She's going to come bring the children. So that's what I did. I went back and went to work, and in a few days I sent her fare. And she come and brought the children. And so I carried her and another lady to the job, to the shipyard, and they went right on in, went to work as welders. And me and her both was working on the same shift and everything. And that's when we cash our checks up there on 23rd, and we'd have, it wasn't $200, but it was over 100 put in our pocket. That was a blessing. So we saved money like that. Oh yeah, sure. Well, you know, I could remember what was the first things we bought. We bought some furniture, all right, and bought some nice clothing. And that was quite a thrill to have a bank account. Something I hadn't had, you know. Yeah, it was a problem. That's I heard before I left. That's what my daddy, I never will forget what he said. He, as I said, I used to always believe in taking orders from him. So I went up to his house and told him that I planned to come to California. And then when it got pretty close to the time I was fixing to leave, I was up there one day, and I talked with him a good while, and then I got ready to leave, and I walked out, going down the hallway to leave, and he followed me. He went, come along with me, and something he hadn't been doing, and he told me just before we got to the steps, says, what I want to say to you is I don't think you ought to go to California. And he'd been used to me doing what he said do. So I don't remember what else was said, but I remember him saying that, and I left and went on home, but I didn't change my plans no way. The day I had planned to leave, I left, and I caught a bus there, and rode bus all the way into Berkeley. And then when I got to Berkeley, what I planned to do was to find these two fellows that left home. And I was walking after I left the bus station on the streets, and I met two or three, and I'd ask them, did they know these fellows, and they'd tell me no. So, and I remember the last person I met, the question about these fellows from home was there was a young black lady that I stopped her and asked her, did she know him? She told me no, she didn't. So we left and walked on, got maybe hardly half a block, and she stopped and turned around and called me. She said, was you looking for a place to stay? And I thought I was going to find them. I remember I started to tell her no, but I told her, well, yes, I could. She told me, says, on up there, 2 blocks on the corner, and told me that house. Says, housing. I need the place to stay. And she asked me, you want to find a place to stay? I told her, yeah. She told me how to go, where to go on up in the house to stop at. And I went right on there, and I went in, and this was a senior lady. Her name was, they called her Mother Lily. So I went in and told her what I was there for, looking for a place to stay, and she told me, well, I ain't got but this one room, and there's one man already that stays here. He's just out of the penitentiary, and they had to find a place to stay before they would let him, and I let him come here. He's in there, and if you wanted to, he gonna stay one night. If you want to, you'll have to sleep with him tonight. He killed a man, and I never did forget that. I had to sleep with that type of person the first night I was in town. But he left the next day. And then I had that place there with Mother Lily. And I was thinking about it, I'll never forget. Yeah. After I went to work and wrote back home, the news got out, my address and everything. For the next, I sent and got my brother and another friend. But for the next 2 or 3 trips from home, the guys would come there. And that was on Carlton Street in Berkeley. But as you spoke about the housing situations, the projects wasn't finished. They were working on them in 1943. So they told us in the shipyards that you get a blank here and fill it out and put in for your housing, but they'd tell you may not get one for 6 months or more. And so I got a paper and filled it out for a house, for a rental place. And it was just a blessing. It wasn't over 3 weeks. On my time card when I got it that one morning, they had a little note on there, you got an apartment on South 25th Street. And it was a 3-bedroom. So I went there and was there for, I wasn't there too long before there was I sent and got my brother, and they was there with me. I never will forget the night I was working swing shift, and they come in while I was away from work, and to show you what the difference is now. Then you didn't have to lock your door, and my door wasn't locked. When I come in from work swing shift, I opened my door and went in, there was 2 guys laying up in my bed, my brother and so I took them and they went to work, and they were staying there with me, and then there was 2 more couples come from home, and they come there. They just crowded me out. So when I sent and got my family, they come, and so then I had to clear out all the others, you know. And kid, my wife, she got a job, and we worked there. And then later on, I put in for a big apartment, and I got another apartment over on State Street that it had, was it 4 bedrooms, I believe. Anyway, I moved from there over on State Street. And there was this, and then that just triggered off others coming. They just come to California then. And they would, like I said, they would come to my apartment. They had my address. So I would help them, go to the shipyard with them, and then try to help them find a place to stay, you know. And it was a big thrill to me to not to have to use that hammer and whatnot. And I got promoted to give the orders, you know. And it was, I remember when that happened one night, I wasn't expecting it, but when you was on the job, there was a speaker, a loudspeaker, if there's anybody working there that had some happen or anything, they had to call them, they'd call your name. So they called my name on the loudspeaker. Louis Napoleon Van Hook, come to the office. There's some news for you. I didn't know what it was. So I took off and went on there. And the little lady grabbed some sheet paper and shoved them out there. Says, fill that out. Put your name and fill that out there. Said, you've been promoted to a leaderman. So I filled it out. So the next day, I went to the yard, and the superintendent, he carried me and showed me where to go and give me the list of the men that was going to be working under me. And from then on, that's what I did. I just, you know, give them orders. No, I sure didn't. I wasn't expecting nothing like that. And that was quite a blessing. Like I say, I wasn't used to that kind of money. But this old man that loaned me that money, I paid him, sent him, mailed him his money. And, well, when I first went back home was when I paid him. And I went and carried it to him, carried him. And I remember my dad, he told me, says, you don't have to pay it all at once maybe, but I just went on and paid it all. He told me that day he didn't think I ought to come, but I come on, I didn't change my schedule at all. I come on, went to work, and then I remember after I went back home and my family was here, I stayed in touch with them. And my mother wrote me a letter and told me that they wanted to see us. We'd been away from home long enough, and they thought we ought to come home. They wanted to see us. So I had bought me a new pickup truck, and my brother had a 39 model Chevrolet. So we got together and decided we wanted to drive home, and so we did. Me and his kids were small, and some of mine was. So we drove home and visited my dad and mother, and so they did decide that they wanted to come back with us. So they got in his car with him. And so we brought him back home here, brought him back here. He stayed with me first. And I had an old friend of mine that I was a barber then. I'd been cutting his hair. Well, when I first went to work in the shipyard, there wasn't no union. They didn't have mention there, but I don't remember how long it was before this boilermaker union come in and we had to join it. And I don't remember what it cost and nothing like that. All I remember was the boilermaker union is what you had to get in from then on to get a job. Yes, I can slightly remember some of that, but there was some problems, all right, with that. But I can slightly remember that it ended up, and we wasn't worried with it no more after they told us wouldn't be bothered with that problem no more. I'm telling you, after having a job and making the kind of money I was making, it was. And as I went to tell you about my dad, this friend of mine asked me, was all my brothers working and all? Told him, yeah. He said, well, I knew a place where I could get him a job, and so I thought about my dad. Told him about my daddy. He said, well, told me where to bring him to. So he carried him to Yard 1, to the paint department. And they gave him a job of just doing some clean work around the painting places. Good job for him. And so I just thought about not only surprised to get him here and then got him here and got him a job. He worked there and saved some money out of that. Well, yes, them union problems, I remember, but I done forgot just what happened. I should never forget that. Yeah, well, it's me and my brother had, when we left home, had a quartet. So after he got here with me and him and one more young fella from home, we started doing some singing at the apartment there. And we wound up getting 4 voices, what we needed in a quartet. And we had a way of rehearsing probably nearly every night when we get together there. So being a barber and cutting hair too, there's always some guys coming in. So there was another fellow that come in and heard us sing, and he was a good singer. He joined in with us. And this fella, I done forgot his name too, but he was in the office at the radio, and he gave us that name. Yeah, we was all working in the shipyards. And the way we got started, on some nights in the shipyard, they would take a couple of hours for partying. And I told some of them there at the partying one night that I had a group of singers. So they told me, so you bring them in, we want to hear them sing. So I got them there one night and they heard us sing. Yeah, that man was named J.P. Owens. He was the manager in the office for the radio. I mean, when we were singing in the yards, they usually when you get a crowd that way and they wasn't working, they would get crossed up, maybe have a little misunderstanding, fights, but I guess them songs would have an effect on the feelings of them. And it was just peaceable. There wasn't no trouble. Yeah, so we needed a bass singer. I just said it was the good Lord. We needed a bass singer. And one night we were singing, and I felt that he had, being that far back, there's some things I can't remember, good, but I remember thinking well of him, what he did, the way he did. Now, when I look back at that, it was some bad times. Yeah. Yes, during them days, it was some good days that we enjoyed. No, I didn't. I always call it a blessing. That's the way I felt about it ever since I left and came here. I felt that it was the way it turned out. My dad didn't agree for it, and after so long, he was come on out here himself, and the whole family was here and been here ever since. And I just think it was just a blessing that led me and taught me into coming here. Well, I had some that went back way years later, but not no